So, as I was saying when no one could hear me, but yeah, you could hear me, this past Monday, September 21st, 2020, Gizmodo published an IO9 exclusive interview titled Dark Crystal Age of Resistance has been cancelled by Netflix. And that's what this article is here. And so I do want to read the first 5 paragraphs of that just to make sure we have all the facts and, actually know what we're talking about. I know often I can kind of just see a title and just, oh, what in the world? But let's keep going with this. It reads, the story of Thra on Netflix is over. IO9 has exclusively confirmed the streaming service has chosen not to renew the Dark Crystal Age of Resistance, meaning the series has come to an end after only one season. Over a year after the series first debuted on the streaming service, the Jim Henson Company's CEO and executive producer Lisa Henson and Netflix shared with IO9 that there will not be another season of Age of Resistance. The groundbreaking series based on Jim Henson's fantasy film. In a statement, Henson thanked fans for their support and said they're looking for other ways to continue the story. Quote, "We can confirm that there will not be an additional season of the Dark Crystal Age of Resistance. We know fans are eager to learn how this chapter of the Dark Crystal saga concludes, and will look for ways to tell that story in the future. Our company has a legacy of creating rich and complex worlds that require technical innovation, artistic excellence, and masterful storytelling. Our history also includes productions that are enduring, often finding and growing their audience over time and proving again and again that fantasy and science fiction genres reflect eternal messages and truths that are always relevant. We are so grateful to Netflix for trusting us to realize this ambitious series. We are deeply proud of our work on Age of Resistance and the acclaim it has received from fans, critics, and our peers, most recently receiving an Emmy for Outstanding Children's Program." End quote. Netflix also released a statement to IO9 congratulating the series on its Emmy win and thanking the folks behind the scenes for creating the show. Quote, "We are grateful to the master artist at the Jim Henson Company for bringing the Dark Crystal Age Resistance to life for fans around the world. We're thankful to the executive producers Lisa Henson and Hallie Stanford and Louis Leterrier, who also directed all episodes, as well as the writers, cast, and crew for their outstanding work, and thrilled they were recognized with the Emmy this weekend." End quote. This, of course, came as some pretty devastating news because, we were all really excited about the show. We love the show. It brought Thra back to our eyes to feast in its original form, puppetry. And it was amazing. It was incredible. We've talked a lot about the show, and you all know how much I loved it. And I wish I had more time to talk about it and do more videos on it. But regardless, it especially, I think, hurt because it just won an Emmy 4 days ago. It won the Emmy, a shared win, but a win nonetheless, and that's huge. And that kind of made us all think, oh wow, okay, for sure, they were going to see it season 2 news, something like that, right? Because season 2 left off on a total cliffhanger, and we fell in love with those characters. We want to see what happens to them. We don't know. Like, okay, yeah, we have the film, but what about all those new characters we got in between? What happened to them? And we're all very curious. Well, that brings us to today. So, as y'all know, this is Jason Delgado, the Dark Crystal Conjunction, and with me today is Sean from Angle of Eternity. It is a Facebook group, and he also joined me for the trivia. So, first off, Sean, how are you doing? And also, I'm kind of curious what the general reactions you're seeing from around the interwebs are.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here, but I wish it was definitely under happier terms.
Yeah.
People, people are all being hit by this, I think, in different ways. Just with everything that's going on in the world right now, it just kind of feels like one more thing, and that makes it a lot harder to process. I think people's emotions are really heightened right now. And so I think, first and foremost, my initial reaction was right now is the time for the fandom to really come together and to be supportive of one another. Because we're not just dealing with the cancellation of a beloved series, we're looking at so much else that's going on in the world, and it all kind of feels mixed up and compounded together. So, the very first thing I would say is the reaction that I hope to see is fans reaching out to be supportive of one another, putting aside personal differences. If they're going through a hard time emotionally, don't hesitate to share that. Be really forward and forthright with that, and people will definitely reach out to support you in whatever way that they can. As far as my own personal response, it's been complicated. I feel like on the one hand, I sort of saw this coming. It sort of feels like, this is what our worst fears was confirmed. So there's definitely that aspect of it, but I also feel, strangely enough, a sense of relief because I feel like now that we know what the decision is, we can work around that. That's kind of where we can say, oh, okay, now we know what the steps are that we need to take.
Yeah, 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 for sure. And that's kind of the same. So, not a lot of people know that I, outside of doing this channel, which, as you know, I haven't been giving as much time as I used to with it. New family, new kids, lots of life changes, moving, so forth and so on. Um, but I'm glad that anytime I do come out with a video, at the very least, I've been trying to do the monthly ones. There's always lots of support, lots of talk, and one of the reasons I love it is not only because I love Dark Crystal, but I love talking with all the fans. They're some of the kindest people. I really, really, it just encouraged me to keep going on, to keep making videos. I've been having to see more people making great art and videos and just all these different things, or even just coming in to talk and chat about the Dark Crystal and how inspiring it is to them as artists or people who never thought they could even do art and start experimenting with it. So when you lose something that precious, yeah, it does really hurt. And anyways, I started saying all that because I also mostly frequent. I know you're mostly on Facebook and whatnot. I mostly frequent Twitter and Reddit. Uh, the Reddit or the subreddit, the Dark Crystal subreddit, has like almost 13,000 members. It's been around for 9 years, and actually, it was featured on Reddit's front page yesterday as kind of one of the top 5 featured blogs. Unfortunately, there was bad news all tied with it, but sometimes bad news can be good press. So if we can get cool Dark Crystal stuff out to more people, I wish it didn't happen this way, but nonetheless, that's sometimes what happens. So you kind of just go with it, but. Yeah, it's been weird and different reactions I've seen. I've seen everything from anger to sadness to confusion to like, okay, well then what do we do now? Or just a mixture of all those things. And so we wanted to make sure we had, let people know like, yeah, this was a big bummer. We got really connected to this, and this is not what we expected, especially after we get something like an Emmy. And so we kind of want to know, like, okay, well, then where do we go from here? That's something you and I kind of want to talk about. And so, um, did you have any other comments on that or any other thoughts, Sean? Oh,
Well,
and by the way, Sean doesn't have a camera. That's why I'm not showing his picture. So,
one of the things that immediately comes to mind is that I feel like so many of the creators are also kind of going through the same cycle of emotions that we are. They're definitely feeling the grief and the frustration. But we're seeing a really strong outpouring of support from the fans to the creators, but also from the creators back to the fans. And I think that that's just so important right now in terms of uplifting everybody and kind of allowing people to grieve at their own pace and in their own ways.
for sure, for sure. Cool. Well, as I was saying, amongst all the different emotions, all the varying emotions. Some people have been quick, like, okay, well, what do we need to do? What can we do? Asking lots of questions. How much do we know? This and that. This is something I know you've looked into for a while and have been keeping tabs on. You've had some thoughts for a while, even before we heard news of cancellation. We were always thinking like, okay, what do we need to do? We would hear a lot from the Dark Crystal folks that you know, the main thing you guys can do is rewatch the show, watch it and watch it again. It's one of the reasons we did the Thraw-thons and whatnot. And we kind of want, okay, are there other things we can do now that it's canceled, or is all hope lost? So one thing I did was kind of through all the various social medias over the last couple of days, once this news broke, I kind of collected some of the most asked questions in so many ways, and I definitely want people to ask questions in the chat, and I will try to be looking at that more. With my mic break, I kind of lost track of a little bit of the chat, but I do want people to send in any questions they have or give us suggestions as well. So I do have a list of about 7 questions that we can ask, or that I'm going to ask, and we'll discuss. And again, please feel free to chime in, and we'll kind of go from there and see what we find helpful, or bounce ideas off each other and whatnot. So one of the first questions I saw the most was, can't just another streaming service pick this up? The Jim Henson Company already works with Apple TV on Fraggle Rock, for example, or Disney Plus with Earth to Ned, and those are great. Can't someone else just make the second season of the Age of Resistance happen?
So yeah, that's a complicated situation, just because of the way that the rights work. Typically, and there are very few exceptions to this, there have only actually been two exceptions in the history of Netflix, but with Netflix originals, those are exclusively produced for Netflix. Netflix pays for all of the production expenses. So it's very unlikely that we're going to see The Dark Crystal picked up by another company, because the distribution rights for live action television series are currently with Netflix. And from my understanding of the contract, so long as Netflix continues to house the Dark Crystal Age of Resistance on their platform, it can't be shipped around to other networks or other streaming services. That said, Netflix does not have the rights to the comics. They don't have the rights to the novels. So if the Jim Henson Company wants to tell that story outside of the medium of television, they can do that. But as far as like Apple TV or Amazon Prime or Disney Plus picking it up, I think that's probably fairly unlikely. It's not completely impossible, but I would definitely rule it out as a probability.
Yeah, one question that people kind of bounce off and ask, that it brings in a lot of like the reason why. Why did they cancel? Why did they do that? And so far, there really hasn't been an official reason given. There's a lot of good guesses we can make, or deductions, maybe necessary consequences. Whether they're good or bad, I don't know. But there's been some rumors out there, this and that. And in my news, I never really share stuff that's not officially labeled. I never really shared rumors or things like that. Um, so we really don't know the reason why, and no matter what it was, we kind of still want to keep asking questions like, well, how do we move forward? What can we do at this point? Which kind of gets to another question. This is a question people have been wrestling with, and some people have already made a decision on. And this was one of these options was kind of my initial reaction. I was like, man, well, forget you, Netflix. Like, if this is what you're gonna just keep doing, like great properties, then peace out, whatever. Um, Question two, should we boycott Netflix or rewatch the show on the service that really just upset me by canceling my favorite show? It's kind of you can see the struggle there. What do you think?
So my thoughts on that are essentially that Netflix is really the power holder right now. They're the one that has the distribution rights. If you boycott them or if you cancel your subscription, you're not really doing anything to lift the property up, to support the Jim Henson Company, or to help out fans. Unfortunately, even though that feels like a very valid way to express your frustration, it doesn't actually do anything productive. So what I would suggest is, as angry and as frustrated as you may be with Netflix, just remember that it was Netflix that greenlit the show, that made the show possible to begin with, and that it was Cindy Holland at Netflix who, said to the Jim Henson Company, I don't want to do this with animation. I think this really needs to be done with puppets, just like the film. And that was an incredibly brave decision to make. And we kind of owe a huge debt of gratitude to Netflix for taking that risk. So, my advice would be right now, I think our best bet is to keep watching the show, keep sharing it, bring in new viewers if possible, and try to focus on the positive rather than the negative.
Yeah, it's definitely, that's a tough issue, and there's lots of things. There's other things, like maybe upsetting people as Netflix, and that was kind of like the straw that broke the camel's back. So I can understand that. The only other advice I guess I would tack on is, don't want to encourage you to go against your conscience. So if you're just like, nope, can't do it anymore. Too many things upset me about Netflix. I'm gone. Then okay, I understand that. Um, whether it's the best for the future of Age of Resistance, that's really the question. So another question that kind of relates is, well, can't we just do some crowdfunding to make this happen? Like actually on Reddit, one of the most asked questions, people just making thread after thread, is like, should I start a Kickstarter, or is anyone going to do a GoFundMe, or how do we do this? Is that, and and no one really asked like how much does it cost? Can we even afford it? Is it feasible? Like since there's so many elements that have to come together for Dark Crystal. Anyways, what are your quick thoughts on that?
So I've done a lot of research on kind of what the statistics are for viewers, what the budgeting is, and then also what the fandom is in terms of numbers. And it's kind of based on what we know about how many people like the Dark Crystal on social media, on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, all of those different formats. um, it would cost a lot of money, and I mean a lot of money, for us to actually crowdfund the series. We're talking about potentially hundreds of dollars per fan, and I don't think that right now that is realistic or feasible. I think there are things that we could potentially do to help, but I don't think that crowdfunding is realistically one of them. With that in mind, however, we also don't know kind of what the financial aspects of the contract between the Jim Henson Company and Netflix are. It's entirely possible that even if we were to do crowdfunding, that they wouldn't be able to accept that money because we weren't part of the initial financier agreement.
Yeah, and one a couple of people bring it up like I'm not really sure if the fan base would be willing to throw in that much money for what that huge production, that many people. When you look at all the stats, this many puppeteers, this many voice actors, blah blah blah. I mean, there's so many hands in that project. Um, and someone brought it up, being like, I don't know if we would actually be able to do that. And one thing I was thinking of was like, a couple times that I've seen other, there's been a couple Dark Crystal documentaries that have been tried to been made. They didn't get funded. Not a couple, I think just one. A couple of years ago. I think this is all before Age of Resistance, so maybe it might be a little more popular and could happen now. A couple of people that will run Patreons, some of them have started them and they will stop them. They try to start them up again. I never see those that successful, and
Yeah,
so it's like we maybe it's because we like collecting stuff, so we spend all our money on the Weta action figures or not the action figures, the Weta models, and some of that stuff's really expensive, and because this stuff isn't mass produced, it's a little higher end to collect Dark Crystal stuff. So there's a couple of reasons why, and some of us just can't afford it. I know a couple of people that got Netflix, binge watched Age of Resistance, and got rid of it because that's they couldn't keep that going. So it's totally understandable.
exactly. And so I think for a lot of people, it's just not a financial reality.
Yeah.
I know for so many of us, if we are able to get, a piece of merchandise or a sculpture or an original piece of artwork, it's a very big deal.
Yeah.
Most of us have to save up money to do that. And I think just with everything that's going on economically, uh, it wouldn't be good for us to kind of put that additional expense on fans,
Yeah.
especially if it comes at the expense of the actual merchandise and the things that are being licensed right now by the Jim Henson Company.
Yeah. Yeah. One thing I've kind of seen that people have said, and this is a good thing. They're saying like, well, maybe we shouldn't have got a season two because it would, as sad as the ending of the first one was, in some part, there's obviously moments of triumph and victory, but there are some sad moments. Like, wouldn't it be worse if we have to actually like see the Gelfling genocide or things like that? Like maybe this is better.
So my immediate thought to that is I kind of think on other franchises. Typically, the way that they're structured is the first entry to the franchise, whether it's the Lord of the Rings or Star Wars, it kind of sets up the characters, it sets up the scenario, it introduces you to the threat, and then the second chapter is where things kind of just go absolutely wrong. That's usually where the Fellowship gets broken up, or your captain gets frozen in carbonite. That's typically, or the hero loses a hand. So
Yeah.
you kind of have to expect that things would get darker before they get better. But the thing to keep in mind is that we do know the end point. We do know at the end that yes, some of the Gelflings survive. Yes, they do repopulate Thra, and yes, they heal the Dark Crystal. So I think there's still a very hopeful end, and it does kind of come full circle and lifts you out of that kind of darkness. Whether we want to subject ourselves to seeing that, I mean, I kind of enjoy the darkness. I think it makes sort of when you come out the other side all that much more rewarding. I don't think that you would be crying at the end of The Return of the King if you hadn't gone through what you did in The Two Towers.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
for
totally.
for me, kind of part of the emotional payoff is going through that. But I also think that in terms of the characters' story arcs,
Mm,
that's also part of their emotional payoff too.
yeah,
We don't know what happens to Deep. We don't know what happens to Brea. We know that there are Skeksis and Uru that are still alive at this point in the timeline that are not around at the time of the film. So, I mean, I think for me, more than anything, my curiosity outweighs any hesitation about kind of the emotional aspect of it. I sort of want to see those stories come to fruition and have those characters' arcs paid off.
yeah, for sure. And another thing I'll add is it's early on because some people were even asking like, wait a second, this is a prequel. We know what happens. This is going to end depressingly. And some people made that same argument before they even got the show. Um, and the writers would be very kind of tactful in how they would say, we're not allowed to use the G word like genocide, and also there's a lot of room for hope on Thra, and they would kind of drop these hints, and throughout the year you kind of got more of those hints, and there's a lot of really good fan theories, and there's some things that I think totally makes sense and would be consistent with the books and the comics and even the Dark Crystal movie. It's like, because when you get the power of the Dark Crystal, you're like, how did that many Gelfling just show up all of a sudden? Like, if this was like an Adam and Eve thing, Jen and Kira for 100 trying, like, I don't know. I don't know. I'm just saying. I do personally think there could be a lot of room for hope, a lot more survivors than we probably think without it being a different timeline or something like that, like a consistent thing like that. But anyways, that's for another time, another
Without
world.
getting too speculative, too, we also know based on the power of the Dark Crystal that they're the Firelings, and we
Yep.
haven't seen them on screen whatsoever in any of the television show or the film.
Hmm.
But Brian Froud has also hinted that there is potentially some lost clan of Gelfling out there that we haven't seen yet.
Yeah, he just
And
threw that out randomly, like,
yeah,
whoa. Yeah, yeah, because they're like, what's your favorite clan, or what would you be for? And he's like, oh, that hidden one.
and so we don't know. I mean, my feeling kind of all along has been that, Agra thought that the Gelfling were already, gone. She thought
Yeah.
that they were completely extinct.
Hmm.
And then she meets Jen. And of course, then Jen discovers that there's Kira. And so, right off the bat, we kind of know that we're dealing with unreliable narration. We know that we're dealing with kind of individual perspectives that are very subjective and that we can't necessarily count on them to kind of be gospel. There are going to be things where there are plot points that are revealed that kind of contradict what our assumptions are based on what we've learned
Yeah.
because we're assuming that what we've learned is authoritative and in fact it's not.
Exactly.
So
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of hope.
Yeah, and Dark Crystal has showed us that time and time again. Like, it's got its twist. It's great.
Well, and the thing to keep in mind is that a lot of the Gelfling in the Age of Resistance series assumed that the Groton were extinct.
Yep.
And as we saw, every time that the camera swept down into those tunnels, there are a ton of Groton. It's
Or
not like the society
the
of
Grunax. Yeah, everyone thought the Grunax were done away with, but they've
yeah,
still found
and there
survivors. So
and I don't think that they can realistically just take two Grunak and turn them into an entire army of Gartham. So it's
yeah,
possible there's more than two Grunak,
yeah, very
and
likely. Those are some of
their
those more
their
hints.
their fate is quite grim. I'll say.
Yes, indeed, indeed. But so someone asked a good question. It kind of goes along with the exact same question I have next. They're saying like, can't we just well, I'll just ask the question I have because it'll answer that. Have other TV shows ever been saved by fans? Like, has a TV show said or a studio said, we're canceling this, or network, we're canceling this show, and then years later that show gets life again? Has that ever happened?
Oh, absolutely. It's rare, but it does happen. I mean, right off the top of my head, the ones that come to mind are Arrested Development. That was canceled by FX, and then it was later picked up by Netflix. Same thing with Veronica Mars, the original channel that showed that canceled it, and then they ended up getting a movie that kind of tied things up. Buffy the Vampire Slayer was
Yeah.
canceled by the WB and then picked up by UPN for its final two seasons. And so there have definitely been instances where that has occurred. It's a little bit less kind of normal. you see it happen a lot less frequently when it's with a specific streaming service and it's kind of considered an original or exclusive to that streaming service. But for example, One Day at a Time, which was on Netflix, that was canceled, and then they ended up having a huge fan outpouring that brought it back.
Yeah,
Farscape,
okay, go ahead. Go ahead.
oh, I was just going to say Farscape is another Jim Henson property that had been canceled by Sci-Fi.
Mm.
And I was actually involved in a small capacity in signing the petition and trying to get that viral way back when. And they ended up doing a 4-hour miniseries.
Yeah.
The Henson Company did, and so we did get to see that story kind of tied up. It wasn't how the producers and the writers had hoped it would go because they were hoping to have at least one full season, but they did manage to get a 4-hour miniseries, which I do consider a victory under the
Yeah.
circumstances.
Yeah, for sure. Couple people in the chat are bringing up um, Star Trek has The Expanse, Family Guy, Lucifer was saved, so forth and so. Clone Wars. Remember that last season of Clone Wars, which was just grand. I can't. I was shocked that happened. My kids and I were like bouncing up and down, and that was a phenomenal season. Firefly. They wound up
Yeah, Firefly is a
getting
great.
to close up the stories with movies. They also had some comics to kind of finalize stuff, and but even still today, they're still coming out with Firefly comics, and they're great. I've been reading them. They're from the same publishers that do the Dark Crystal comics, Kea, and they're like episodes of Firefly. So it's really great. And that kind of leads us into the next question, is like, could this just be finished up in books or comics, or should we be content with that, or should we really try to be like, no, let's go for the way it was originally? What do you think about that?
I have mixed feelings. I mean, my immediate thought, obviously, is that it's preferable to see it finished with puppets. We
Yeah.
really want to see Dee. We want to see Rian. We want to see Omri, who hasn't even been introduced in the television series yet. There's so many characters who I feel are richer when you have the puppeteers and the voice actors behind them. I think they just feel stronger that way. Uh, my thing is that I think we really need to kind of advocate for getting a mini series or a film, and that's really kind of what fans want. I don't think that people want to see a CG animated continuation, if that's even on the table. Um, Lisa Henson has suggested that we'll see this story unfold somehow, but she hasn't really specified what
Yeah.
what the possibilities are. Uh, the books, which are great, I think that would be a good way to kind of wrap things up. It's possible that if you were to do books or comics, that you could even expand the storyline some because you wouldn't be inhibited by financial aspects. The financing of it wouldn't really be an issue because you'd mainly be paying for the writing and the artists, and not all of the puppets and the special effects. So, I mean, again, I would prefer to see it done live action on screen with puppets, and I think that most of the people at the Jim Henson Company kind of feel that way. Whether that's a possibility for them, that's kind of all just up for speculation at this point. I don't think anyone really has any answers, especially with the pandemic going on, and
Right. Yeah.
productions like this have to kind of just be put on hold. You can't have people socially distancing and operating a mystic puppet where you have
Yeah.
4 or 5 people all smushed in there together.
Yeah. The Skeksis
Um,
puppets. Yeah. Yeah. That was something. That was an example that Lisa Henson brought up a couple interviews ago, as well. So.
yeah, well, and that was one of the reasons why they didn't do more mystics in the series was that they are just so complicated to operate, and
Yeah.
it is such a heavy and physically taxing performance.
Hmm.
Um, And so, I mean, I would be open to having comics and books. I don't think that that's necessarily a bad thing, but
Yeah.
I don't think it would be as satisfactory for most fans as seeing the story unfold on screen.
Yeah, I totally agree. And there's so many other things they kind of already hinted at and told us. I remember at one point Lula Terrier is like, "Oh yeah, the opening narrator, the one voiced by Sigourney Weaver, that's actually a Gelfling, and we have a puppet idea for her, and you'll see her in season 2." Like they said stuff like that. So you were just like, "Oh, cool." Plus other Skeksis, or Skekvar or Skeksar, so forth and so on. Seeing them in again or for the first time would be really really super cool. Plus different Uru you could have, and yeah, there's so many options. I mean, so many options. Yeah, I think by default it sounds like they're going to get the story out one way or the other, but it sounds like the fans are going to have to put in a little extra time to kind of get it at the ideal we want of puppetry, So,
Yeah.
but
Well, and that's one thing that I think can't be emphasized enough is that with or without Netflix, this isn't the end of the Dark Crystal. The Dark Crystal as a franchise is still flourishing. I mean, we're still getting new comics. We still have the wonderful Dark Crystal Bestiary book that's coming out with Iris Compiet's
oh yes,
illustrations.
phenomenal looking.
And so the franchise is going to continue to blossom. What medium it blossoms in may change as a result of this, but it's going to keep going. There's still going to be new stories. There's still going to be new characters. And the important thing is that fans just keep supporting that as much as they can.
Yeah. I'm sorry, I'm laughing because someone said that they would huddle under Becky's arm if she needed the help. Becky's the one who did Deeds, so that was a funny comment. Anyways, kind of last question before we kind of move on to like, okay, do we have hope? Is there hope? What can we do now? Um, Age of Resistance is a Netflix original. We kind of already touched on this. Has Netflix ever gotten rid of their originals? Because I think that makes that a little trickier, especially going back to the shopping around question.
Yeah, so there have only, like I said, there have only been two instances that I'm aware of where Netflix actually allowed their shows to essentially migrate to another platform or to another channel. So there isn't a great precedent for it, but I mean, it's not impossible. I feel pretty hopeful about the franchise overall. I don't think we're in a situation where we were kind of like when I grew up and when you grew up, where you had the 1982 theatrical release, and then you had the VHS, the Betamax, the Laserdisc, and
Yeah.
eventually the DVD. But there was a good 20 26 years or so
Hmm.
between when the film came out and those initial books in 1982 and 1983, and when we eventually started to get comics with the Legends of the Dark Crystal series, and then eventually later with the J.M. Lee novels. And so I don't think that fans need to despair and think like, oh no, now we're going to go into like this decades long drought and there's not going to be any Dark Crystal, because that's just not likely to be the case. I mean, Archaea isn't going to cancel their series just because the show was canceled.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's definitely hope out there.
Yeah. Those comics have been going since before Age of Resistance was announced, and they've been doing one consistently for the last 3 years, or one series, 12 issues a month. So, yeah, yeah, yeah. So, yeah, I was showing here that it took almost a decade it took more than a decade really for the pre-production of what Dark Crystal 2 feature film was going to be, which eventually kind of morphed and turned into, they got a lot of character inspiration and ideas from that because they'd done so much world building for it, to what became the Age of Resistance. And again, one of the questions is like, how could they get rid of such a masterpiece? Masterpieces are pretty rare. They don't happen that often, and I think a lot of us do consider this a masterpiece, a true work of art with all and that means a lot of work is going to go into it. And it might mean that we have to be a little more patient, if we want it to be at the height that it is right now. But I'm willing to be patient, and we'll see. So, anyways, that kind of brings us on to our kind of next section, which is really, the second part of this video is like, well, the what now. Now that we've kind of explored these questions, now that we've kind of considered some options, is there hope? One of the first things I wanted to do was highlight some of what the producers, writers, cast and crew members are saying. There hasn't been a whole bunch of messages out there yet. Sometimes people don't reply for days or weeks, but there has been some really sweet ones. Um, Javier Grillo Marx Watch, who was a producer and also wrote episode 7, the puppetry one. Also, writer of Lost, and wonderful, wonderful, wonderful dude. He wrote, "My wife wanted to post this, but I didn't want to share the moment. Now that the Dark Crystal's fate, cancellation, has been revealed, I feel it okay to tell you this story. The Dark Crystal reduced me to ugly man tears twice. Once when I realized it was the job for which I was interviewing, and second, when I found out we were being awarded an Emmy. I had no hope that we would get an award. We were on the ballot with a documentary about kids who learned Dr. King's speeches for a forensic competition. Oh, yeah, and Star Wars. When the news came out that we tied the documentary, out came the waterworks. Every show is the result of a conglomeration of miracles. The Dark Crystal was the most fragile example of the most unlikely of elements coming together. Some days, like today, you just run out of miracles. But we now know they can happen, and from there, hope springs eternal. Another really encouraging one from Toby Fraud, who is, of course, the creative designer on all the episodes. Again, I loved all the pictures he shared, especially, I've been seeing a lot of tweets with all the Dark Crystal hugs. There really are a lot of really good hugs in Age of Resistance. It's great. Anyways, he writes, to all the heroes of Thra, we celebrate the achievements, the awards we have received, the articles written, and the amazing reviews, the passion of the fans, and the love for the series, I assume he meant, is astounding. I know I have read, watched, and listened to all I could from everyone who had something to say about this beautiful work. I've been amazed at the depth of thought and passion that comes from each and every one of you. You've asked questions we may not have even considered, found nuances in places we might not have thought of. That's the true beauty of this world, of Thra and the creatures that live there. We have all been saddened by the news. To have the show canceled is hard, especially when there is certainly more to tell. It's the way things fall sometimes. I believe it had to be a very hard decision, or at least I'd like to think so. I will forever be fiercely proud of the show and of the work we achieved, especially the people I got to work with. I know my parents and so many others feel the same. The astronomical talent that came together to make this show is astounding, and what came out is nothing short of a masterpiece, in my opinion. Yeah, mine too. It is so hard to embark on shows where puppets have to captivate and take you on a truly fantastical adventure. That's why it is so rarely done. I, like so many, look to the future, to what is possible and what can be achieved, and look forward to sharing more magic with all of you. Thank you all. Never stop believing and never stop dreaming. Again, just very encouraging words from the Pats. Becky, who did D, Becky Henderson, she, of course, tweeted out, "Long live Thra," and uh, Warwick Brown, I forget his last name, Warwick Brownlow Pike, sorry, he wrote, "In begin, all the same. Big change, sometimes good, sometimes bad." Of course, quoting Agra there. "It was an honor to play in the world of Thra, and I have no doubt that we'll be in that world once again someday. So much love and gratitude to everyone who made the series possible. What a wild dream." And again, one thing I really do want to reiterate is that the cast, the crew, the voice actors, the set makers, I mean, it's all top notch stuff. We want to, of course, cheer them on, when they win those Emmys, and also more, when they kind of find out this devastating news. But, it sounds like so far the people who have tweeted stuff out that they have hope. They don't think it'll be the end. They don't know when, but they have hope, and we kind of just gotta wait and see what happens. And that kind of brings us to our last section of, okay, people are encouraged. People aren't giving up on the Dark Crystal, obviously, especially those who work directly on it. What can we do now? Pretty soon, once the news broke, one of the first things I saw was a petition. And let me go back to that screen and pull that up. And it has been gaining, like when I first saw it, it was, I think, about to hit 2,000 or something. And let's see what it is at now. Let me change to my desktop here. Oh, wonderful. It's hit over 5,000 signatures already. So this link is in I'll go ahead and put it in the chat now, but it is in the video description here. No, that link came out way too long. Hold on. Editing on the spot. At least my mic's working now. Anyways, it says, show Netflix that people would watch the Dark Crystal Age of Resistance 2. And you all know what this is about. It's petition, it's getting your voice out there. It takes a couple seconds. You can sign it. Things like this can help. Sign up for it, send it out. It's something that doesn't cost you anything. Just a little bit of time. So this is something you can do. Another one we have, well, you actually have one, Sean. Do you want to give us a 401, not 401, a 101 on this? 401 not found, or 404.
11 or 11, whatever those numbers are.
Yeah, this one right here.
So the main thing is I feel like realistically is that Netflix seems to have the main objection that the series didn't bring in enough viewers. And I think a lot of people, unfortunately, don't subscribe to Netflix. I think that a lot of people are hesitant to subscribe to all of these, different streaming services and premium networks. It adds up very, very quickly. And so, for so many people I know that watched Game of Thrones and Stranger Things, they didn't watch them specifically on HBO or on Netflix. They waited until the Blu-ray and DVD came out, and that is really what allowed each season to kind of grow. Because once those people had kind of gotten caught up, then they were like, oh, okay, I now know that I love this series and I will subscribe. And, that's what allowed those multiple seasons to occur. And so I think it's really important that we get a Blu-ray, a DVD release, a 4K release, so that we can share it with people, so that we can sit down on our couch and show it with friends, and that we can actually hold a physical copy in our hands and have it on our shelves. We're very much kind of a collector's group in a lot of
Yeah.
ways. I think so many Star Wars fans and Dark Crystal fans, Labyrinth fans, we eat up the merchandise. We get the sculptures, we get the action figures, the comics, the novels, the soundtracks. We're passionate about all of that. And so I think so many of us would love to see a Blu-ray, DVD, or 4K version of the series. And I think that if we could get that released and it sold well, that would be an amazing signal to Netflix that there's still life in this franchise and that they still have something to gain from it. I think, unfortunately, because that they kind of have this binging model where they just
Mm,
dump a whole season
yeah.
on their platform all at once, is what happens is that people watch it over 2 or 3 days during a free trial and then they cancel. Or they'll subscribe just for a month, watch it over the course of a month, and then they cancel. And the nice thing about DVDs, Blu-ray sales, 4K is that it kind of gives a better picture overall of the size of a fandom, what an audience is, and what the real demand is for a specific product or IP. And so I think it's really important to get that physical media out there. Um, and that's kind of, I think, where our focus needs to be, just in terms of kind of sending a message to Netflix that, we want this and we want more of this. It also, I think, for so many people that are choosing to boycott or are choosing to cancel, that still gives them the option of continuing to watch the series and enjoy
Yeah.
the series without resorting to something like piracy, which we really don't want. We don't want people streaming it illegally. We don't want people downloading it illegally, because that hurts the Jim Henson Company. That hurts the puppeteers. And, puppetry is not an industry where you make tons of money. It's an industry where you require those jobs. You need those paychecks.
Yeah.
And I think, there's so many puppeteers right now that are struggling. We just actually, I live in Colorado, and we just had our Denver Puppetry Center closed down because of the pandemic, and that was really heartbreaking. And so, the best way to support the puppeteers, the best way to support the production designers, is to buy the licensed stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep. Yep. I was encouraging some people that in the chat earlier. They're like, oh, I'm okay with doing that. And I was like, but the problem is we need money to make this thing keep moving. So, yeah, I totally agree with you on that. What about hashtags? You had some pretty good ideas. I think you had saw Javier mention some things about preferred hashtags to use.
Yeah, so right after the Emmy win, Javi had posted a photo on Instagram and on Twitter with the caption for Thra. And so, kind of taking guidance from Javi, who's been very outspoken and very supportive with the fans, I thought, well, yeah, let's use for Thra, because I think that's a good way to send a message both to Netflix, to fans, but also to a certain extent to the puppeteers and to the people that worked on this production, because we wouldn't be here without the hundreds and hundreds of talented people that made this show come to life. And so, fourth raw is kind of the catch-all hashtag that we really want to use to send those messages of support, of solidarity, of just kind of love and community throughout the fandom. And then there's another hashtag which we've kind of been quietly encouraged to use, and that is Heal the Dark Crystal. The reason that we want to use Heal the Dark Crystal rather than Save the Dark Crystal is that using the word save is kind of black and white, and it sort of implies that the franchise as a whole is kind of coming under threat, and that's not the case. It's just Age of Resistance on Netflix that's been canceled. And so by saying save the Dark Crystal, it could be misconstrued or kind of implied that, oh, the Dark Crystal is over now, it's done. And that's definitely not the case. And so the Jim Henson Company wants people to know that, yes, you can still be invested in this. Yes, there is more story that's coming.
Indeed, indeed, indeed. I like it. Well, did you have any other final thoughts or suggestions, calls to actions, whatever it may be?
So yeah, I mean, the big one is definitely sign that petition to get a season two. I don't personally know who actually made it or how they got it kind of put together, but it looks great. It's doing really well in terms of numbers. Like you said, it's got over 5,000 people in less than I think 30 hours, which is
Yeah, it's great.
extraordinary. And so that's an amazing start. Some people are probably going to tell you that petitions don't actually do anything,
That was in the
and
comments already. Yeah,
yeah, and the
it's
thing
fine.
is though, is that what I would say to that, because there is some truth to that. Petitions don't come with a guarantee. They don't say, okay, you signed this now, so you're definitely going to be rewarded
Yeah,
for putting your signature there. But the thing is that the more signatures you can get, the more support you can get, and that can sometimes help in bringing in outside financing. That can help for a studio to make an argument like, okay, yeah, there's a bigger audience for this. Maybe we just didn't promote it as well as we should have. Maybe we need to reevaluate kind of what our stance is, why we canceled it, and what the perks would be to renew it. So I would definitely say that petitions are important. Definitely sign the Blu-ray one because I really feel strongly that our best bet to get a live action continuation is going to be getting a physical media release. It's probably our strongest hope. I mean, I hate to sound like Princess Leia, but it may be maybe our only hope to kind of get that done and get that out there, because it is very rare for a series that's been canceled to get a DVD or Blu-ray release, um, unless it's been a big hit.
yeah.
uh,
So I'm also laughing because someone just mentioned, and I do want the Wall of Destiny and shortbread. Oh, I love it. I love it.
that would make an amazing holiday project.
Yes, absolutely. I'm with him.
Gingerbread Wall of Destiny.
Yes, I'm all for it. I'm all
But
for it.
beyond that, the other thing I would definitely say is we are not canceling the upcoming Thrawathon in December. We're still planning to do that December 17th through the 20th. We really have a lot of exciting things planned. We're going to do the trivia again. We're going to do the fan
Oh
art
yeah.
contest again. There's also a possibility that there may be some kind of writing contest involved this time.
Oh, possibility, eh?
Yes, yes. And we've also got some different people who are helping to support that project this time around. So I think it's going to be bigger. It's going to be more polished. It's going to be more planned out. Each time that we've done it, it's kind of grown. When I first organized the original one, I basically did everything within 6 days, and
Yeah, I remember that.
I threw it together on a whim. I'm not gonna lie. It was like, I'm temporarily laid off from work and I need something to do. And I love this series. And at the time, as we found out, rightfully so, there was some doubt as to whether it would get renewed. And I thought that
Yeah.
would be a great way to show support for it. And it didn't guarantee the renewal, but what it did do was it kind of brought the fans together. It gave them something positive to focus on, and it did open some doors.
Yeah.
The second one, of course, was bigger. We had a couple of sponsors. We had people come in and help out, and so the idea is that I think for each one of these Thrawathon events, the fan community can grow. They can come together. They can kind of congregate and support one another. And it's also it's a lot of fun. We had such a great time doing it, doing the previous live discussion that I did with you, and the one that I did with Trial by Stone.
Hmm.
And so it's fun doing these Thrawathons, and I'm hoping that everybody keeps coming back and that they're enjoying them.
I know I am, and I'm already looking forward to that next um, Dark Crystal trivia. So I was excited about the prizes. Hopefully, we can even get some even better prizes this time. So,
Well,
um,
and there's also the fact that this year marks the 38th anniversary of the film, and
yep,
conveniently, the film is back on Netflix in the U.S.
that is
So
true. Oh,
uh,
is it only U.S. or is that all that we
I
verified so
think it's
far?
in the U.S. It may also be Canada. I know that it's not currently on Netflix in the UK or France.
Ooh, bummer,
But
bummer.
there's still ways to participate, and so I think there's going to be a lot of fun things that we can do. And I would also encourage anybody who hasn't seen it yet to check out the Definitive Films documentary, The Crystal Calls, about the making of Age of Resistance, which is also on Netflix.
Yep.
It's absolutely smashing, and it gives a really great view of the various people that were involved at Netflix who actually got Age of Resistance made. And I would almost kind of encourage people who are angry or frustrated with Netflix right now to watch that, because I think it does show that Netflix, their heart was in the right place. They did make this possible. They did give us the best version of Age of Resistance that we could have asked for. And so I think there's a lot of gratitude to be had, even if it's slightly bittersweet.
Indeed, indeed, and I'll just close on the note that though season two got canceled, as you can see, the fans have not been canceled. We've stuck together when there was decades of silence, like we were talking about between the movie and all the potential second movie, and all that really was stuck in production limbo for years and years, and switching directors, and it's canceled, and it's back, and we're making it again, and oh, it's canceled, and eventually that story did get told. It came out as comics. And of course, we still have our books, comics, and who knows what else is still to come. They don't always announce everything right away. There has been a steady stream of Dark Crystal content, and this channel is always focused on all things Dark Crystal. Not just Age of Resistance. So we're not going away. There's still plenty of things we can all do together. I'm still encouraged, and yeah, I am bummed out about the Netflix thing, but I'm still encouraged that Thra is not gone. We can still go to it. And so again, I want to encourage the fans to keep doing the things that have inspired you because of the Dark Crystal, the fan art, the fanfics, the RPGs, the homemade board games and card games. I've heard of all these different sorts of things. Just discussions with fans. Coming up with your ideas of thraws and theories. That is what keeps fandoms like this alive. And who knows? Maybe a year, 2 years, 10, however many years. Because the fandom is still strong. There's still a market to make something like this. So, let's not give up, not lose hope. Like Rian says, there's always hope. There is hope. So let's stick together, and with that, keep exploring Thra.